So my name is Dr. Dan. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and communication, and I've been doing events, singles events, for the past 12 years. And a lot of people in my events have always asked me, Dan, why don't you create or do a few tips, like on TV or videos, or do a vlog, which is a video blog. And I said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. So I went a little bit further than that, and I decided to be able to take my classes as a producer and to be able to have and produce my own shows. And this is what we have here today. So this is going to be the beginning, the first of series of different events, different seminars about relationship, about communication, about dating in the 21st century. So today is the pilot project. So you're all here, you're the beginning. So once you see this on Oprah Winfrey, you'll know that you've been the first one here. So what we're going to do here today, I'm going to introduce you, or each and everyone is going to introduce themselves as the guest panelists, and they're going to share with us their level of expertise, what they know about the subject and the topic. And also, as I said, this event is going to be interactive. I don't want 2 hours of us talking. It's going to get very boring. So we want each and every one, if someone after they finish a question and answer, if you feel that you want to add something, or that probably something that happened to you in the past and you want to have their output, please go ahead, raise your hand. I'm going to go and I'm going to come to you and I'll give you the mic and you'll ask the question. Anyone has any questions here? Is now to raise your hand? Anything? Okay, so Bob, you're the first one.
Hi, I'm Bob Paff. I'm probably the lay person in the panel up here. I wrote a book called Communicating to Win in Life, Love, and Business. It's a transparent look at my life. I've been married, divorced twice. I'm the father of 6 children. I know I look too young to have 6 children, but I do. I've got a media background. I'm a motivational speaker. If any House of Cards fans in the room, I play a congressman in season 2 of House of Cards. I'm the new voice of National Geographic. So regular spots on Fox News and my own show on CBS Radio. So I was talking to Dr. Cohen earlier. I took my life and turned it into a book, so it's a transparent look at my life. What I did right, what I did wrong. I didn't do everything wrong, but really trying to help people through my own mistakes, my 2 failed marriages. Why do I keep making these decisions over and over again? Because if we don't figure out why we're making them, we're going to continue to make those decisions. So I'm here to help you through the process with the assistance of these 2 wonderful folks next to me. I'm Bob Paff.
My name is Joshua Cohen. I am a psychologist in Rockville, Maryland. I have a private practice where I work with adolescents and adults, individuals and couples. I am probably 25 to 30% of my practice at least is working with couples. But probably 100% of the people who walk through my door are having some sort of a relationship problem. It might be a problem with a boss, it might be a problem with a parent, it might be a problem with a spouse. But people are relators, and when they're having problems relating, they come to see somebody like me. So very glad to be here. Welcome to everyone, and I really hope this is interactive and we can answer questions and have a conversation.
Hello, my name is Antoinette Lancaster, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm practicing in Maryland and DC. I have a few different specialties, but like Dr. Cohen, about 25% of the current referrals are for relationship issues, not just marital or those that are dating. But I would also agree that the bulk of all of our clients are struggling with communication. So I'm glad you all came out today, and I hope we have a lot of fun.
Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go one by one. Each and everyone is going to be able to be asked a couple questions that is based on their level of expertise, their level of knowledge, so at least they could give you accurate information based on their past experiences and what they deal on a regular basis. Now, first question is going to go to Dr. Joshua Cohen, and I'm going to ask him, effective communication is key to every healthy relationship. Now, what constitutes an effective communication?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with knowing who it is that you're communicating to. almost more important than the message you're sending. It's whether or not the person who's at the receiving end of that message is known to you and is understood how you're going to be able to effectively reach that person. So, for example, in the book, The 5 Love Languages, which there's a copy up here, it is written by Dr. Gary Chapman. It is a very functional book on relationships. And one of the things that he talks about is when someone is communicating, do they know how to reach the other person in a way that the other person is going to feel cared for, loved, and really heard? And if one knows how to reach that person in that way, they're more likely to communicate effectively. And so I would say that's probably the biggest key, is knowing who it is you're talking to.
What would you supplement Dr. Joshua's Cohen when it comes to how to effective communicating with your spouse, boss, and other people?
Yeah, I would, I agree with Dr. Cohen. The 5 love languages, I think, should be a required read for everyone. The one thing I would add to his comments that I have found, and remember, my thoughts here are based on my real life experiences, is the most important person I believe that you communicate with on a daily basis, this may surprise you, is yourself. And I think unless you know what you want and what you need, and you're comfortable in asking for that and expressing that in a loving, gentle, kind way, you're going to have problems. I look at myself, and at some point you have to stop and say, what do I want out of this relationship? Whether it's a professional relationship or a personal relationship, folks, you've got to be in tune, in touch, identify what it is that you want and what you need. And if you don't know what you need, how is somebody else going to know what you need? And you're going to have conflict if you don't. So the first person you need to communicate with on a regular basis is yourself. That's the only thing I would add to what Dr. Cohen said.
Does anyone know here what all the 5 love languages? Anyone read Dr. Chapman's book? Words of affirmation, act of service, gifts, etc. Do you all know your own love languages? You do? Do you know that there's like a primary one and there's secondary? So you can only have one. Some people like to have gifts. Some others like to have words of affirmation. Sometimes act of service. It depends exactly what it is. So Dr. Chapman's book actually is a very good one. It will at least allow you to know yourself a little bit better as to how you can discuss with your significant other what are the love languages. Now, Antoinette, one question for you here. When it comes to relationship, okay, how can I prepare myself as a person to be before you come into a relationship? What is the primary point that you need to focus on?
The primary point that I recommend to all of my clients is to focus on getting to know yourself. So as Bob mentioned, that's very important. If you don't have an understanding of who you are, how is it that you can possibly understand another person or share who you are with that person? So I work with all of my clients, regardless of why they initiated services, on increasing their understanding of self and accepting who they are.
Perfect. Now, Josh, when it comes to understanding or to know effectively how you communicate with the other person, how do you know that there's not like a barrier or a gap or like a wall? How do you know that the other person have understood what you're trying to say?
So when it comes to, from my perspective, a lot of this happens in my office. So it's a therapeutic perspective. One of the techniques that gets used pretty frequently in a therapist's office has to do with mirroring and validating what another person has said. So you wind up in a situation where you're saying something and the person you're communicating with may or may not be receiving that information effectively. If they don't, you get frustrated as the sender of information. They get frustrated as the receiver of information. So if you do an exercise, for example, where a small amount of information is sent from one person, and then the other person is asked to mirror back exactly what was said with no interpretation and no additional information. It's literally a mirroring of the information that was spoken. All of a sudden, the person who spoke feels validated and heard, maybe for the first time in a very long time. when it goes well, you wind up in a situation where more communication, more frequent communication is desired because it went well and it feels good to people. So there are all sorts of techniques to validate and to mirror, but that's one of them. It's more complicated than that, but it's an example.
Thank you very much, Josh. Bob, when we discussed yesterday, actually, a very similar subject, when you went through, and I know it's going to go a bit personal here,
Yeah.
when you went through the first and second divorce,
Yeah.
do you feel that you repeated the same mistakes when it comes to understanding or communicating with your significant other?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I did, I needed to figure out the root of my problem. You know, I needed to figure out, and it honestly went back to my mother. You know, I came from a broken home. I rescued, you've all heard that term, rescue fantasy, that we think we can save people or change them or rescue them. That was me. And I really thought that, you know, I must have had radar for, no offense ladies, for ladies who needed to be rescued, or at least my perception was that they needed to be rescued. So I needed to, I was telling Dr. Cohen, my second wife immediately jumped into her third marriage, a month after our divorce. Now, I've been single for 7 years because I needed to figure out why I was doing this, or I was going to be sitting in his office for a long time, right? Or making the same mistakes over and over again. So you need to slow down or analyze, why do I need to jump into another relationship? I mean, think about that, folks. And I'm sure these two guys would agree. Why do we keep doing the same things over and over? What is it about us that triggers that need to jump into something all over again and make those same mistakes? So, yes.
One of the interesting things about people who jump right into another relationship, or even if they don't jump in quickly, but they enter a relationship after a divorce, is that if you talk to the second spouse, they are likely to report the exact same issues as the first spouse, and that those are the causes of the second divorce, and the same is true of a third divorce. And so what that suggests is that people are not learning about themselves and making changes once they're having a relationship that has problems, and the same issues will follow. So one of the things I often tell people is find out what the person's previous spouse or significant other complained about. Fill in the end of this sentence. If I told you once, I told you 1,000 times. Boom. And that is likely to happen in your relationship too. And if it does, you may not care. That may not be a problem. But if it is a problem for you, you got a heads up right there.
I've noticed in lots of relationships two negative traits that happen over and over again. And I'd like your advice on how to convert these two negative traits from negatives to positives. The first being loneliness, and the second being anger. What are some of your advice for converting those two negative traits into positive traits?
Well, what I was going to mention before you asked your question, but it's right on time. As Bob mentioned, we feel this way we should get a dog instead of just remarrying. We have to remember that naturally we have a need to be close to another person. Okay? So when working through loneliness, it's really on focusing on who you are, what it is that you like about yourself, what it is that you want to change about yourself. And then figuring that part out, because if you always have yourself, we can work through the loneliness part of it. Okay? And that will prevent you from jumping into a relationship too soon. Now, anger, that's a whole nother monster in itself, right?
I didn't say these were easy questions.
Yeah. Gary Chapman also has a great book on anger. I do a lot of work with helping people learn how to regulate their emotions. Okay? Anger is one of those emotions that are easily identified, but we need to work on identifying the emotions that occur before anger. It's kind of a buildup. And sometimes it is sadness, or depression, or loneliness, or fear that motivates anger. So first we need to work on those underlying emotions that lead to anger. And then perhaps we can turn some of those negatives into a positive.
You know, I think that's a great point. And the other thing is, anger is an emotion like any other. And I typically look at emotions on a continuum. If you don't know happiness, you can't really know sadness. If you don't know content, you can't really know discontent. We should be able to deal with anger, to have anger, to express anger, but to make it functional. And therein lies the issue. When people get angry, they're often not functional with it. But it needs to be able to be there and to be expressed. when it comes to loneliness, I think people can be lonely in a crowded room of friends. Loneliness is from within, not external. So it's not about connecting with another person in terms of being with them. It's about understanding, as my colleagues have said, within what the emotion is that's creating it, and whether or not you can find comfort and satisfaction being alone or with other people.
Finally, I think what this comes down to is awareness. Awareness. I mean, we all have these issues, and I think the two of them would agree. You need to embrace it. If you're lonely, if you're angry, you are what you are, folks. We are where we're supposed to be. The challenge for all of us is to deal with it, to recognize it, to deal with it, say, you know, this really makes me so angry, or I'm so lonely because this happened to me. It's when we go inside of ourselves and we stay there where the damage, not only to ourselves, but to those around us. I told you I have 6 children. You know, my oldest child survived 3 attempts at suicide. From the time he was 13 years old as a result of his mother and my divorce. And so when I tell you I poured my heart out in this book, and I tell you real practical stories and experiences, my son could not express his feelings. He'll be 31 years old next month. And emotionally, he's still 13 years old. And it's very painful for me to see that. So he went inside himself, whereas my 12-year-old son said, my first wife had an affair. And my 12-year-old son said, Mom, I love you, but I don't like you, and I don't want to live with you, I'm going to live with Dad. That's tough for a 12-year-old kid to say to a mother, right? He's doing fine. And his therapist said this kid sees it for what it is, loves his mom, but knows where he needs to be in a healthy place. And so what we're talking about here is awareness. All these things are fine, you just need to be aware of them, and then you need to deal with them.
How many people here are in a relationship now?
A healthy one.
No, anyone.
Anyone. Raise your hands high. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow.
How many people want to be in a relationship? How many people are fearful that your relationship in the future will look like your relationship in the past, whichever one that might be? Okay.
Do you feel? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I actually feel that the loneliness is a state of mind, not a state of being. Because I think one thing that I was talking before we actually started, one thing that I always realize is that I'm not really alone, I'm just by myself. So, you know, and if that's bad company, then I need to know.
Well said.
The people I've encountered, they don't want to meet in person. They want to communicate online, and the online stuff goes on forever. They don't want to pick up the telephone. They only want to text. They'll give you your phone number, but only so you can text them, don't call me, I won't answer. And the texting can go on for 3 or 4 hours a night, where the conversation would be a half an hour. It's just so much less efficient.
So we're talking about online dating. I mean, obviously
Well, no,
things have changed.
I'm talking about even cases where I've met people
Oh.
up front, and then
Really?
it is devolved into, no, I don't want to actually talk on the phone. I don't actually want to. But again, it's not like they don't want to connect, because they want to keep doing the electronic stuff. They don't want to disengage from the electronic stuff. So it's getting to move away, you know, getting to people, get out of the house. You know, they say the living room is the new bar. You know, well, that's not going to connect people. You know, we need to get out in public, and that's my frustration. It's just getting face-to-face time.
Do you ask the person why is it that you don't want to speak on the phone?
Absolutely.
And how do they respond?
Oh, I do.
Okay, they say they do want to
Absolutely.
talk to you on the phone.
I don't want to go into it. I mean, I can show you copies of texts and emails that I have.
So the reason
long
why I
conversations where
asked-
it's, you know, okay, how about this time? Oh, sure. And then the night before, it's like, oh, something came up, I'm not coming.
I think that people are giving you indicators of whether or not they're truly interested. And we have to start paying attention, okay? Because I try to help my clients understand that you have to be a bit more assertive once you understand what it is that you want. So if you fully understand and accept who you are, then you're looking for the same thing from another person. So if someone is telling you that I'm not comfortable communicating in this fashion, that's okay for them, but it's okay for you to say it doesn't work for me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have to move forward, and so we don't get stuck.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't know about, are you guys married in relationships? Do you mind me asking? Okay. I'm a single guy. And so the one thing that I did learn is what I need for me, and bad communication is a deal breaker for me. And let me tell you here now, we guys sometimes get a bum rap, whether we're perceived as players or not being emotional. I've heard it all, okay? And I'm here to say there are women who are players, and there are women who are not good communicators. Surprise, maybe. But I know what I want, and I've said to people, and I've ended relationships with very nice people. We get together and we can have a cocktail or whatever, but and this is all about setting the expectations around communication. I always, when I consult and I speak around the country, I tell people, when you're in conversation with somebody, tell them, what's your preferred mode of communication? I like to text because it's efficient, it's quick. I don't like voicemail because, I got to listen to that now, right? So it's my obligation to communicate that with you. And then my expectation is that's what's going to happen. If that doesn't happen, I'm probably out. And that's okay. I mean, I'm out in a gracious way. And again, I don't say, you don't do this, you don't do that. We blame other people for what we want and what we expect. What I say is, I need this. And if I don't get that, the relationship's not going to work for me, and ultimately you. It's just not going to work. So, absolutely true. You've got to set those expectations and then stick to it. Stick to it.
So here's a question then, based on what you just said, when you're entering a new situation, a new person, you don't know, they don't know you, and you see some signs, and you probably like some, and you don't like others, and they may fit into some of this stuff, and then I mean, it's going to be organic, and I agree that with also what you said, that when you pick up on signs, if we're more realistic about what we're seeing, we can know, yeah, this person may be texting because they're not all that interested, as opposed to you texting because that's how you do it.
Right.
So how quickly do you suggest opening up and starting to say what you want, say what you need, without coming across as too needy and too overly pushy?
I actually, and I wouldn't use the word needy, folks have described me, I've got a business background, so maybe I'm a little type A, but I'm also at a point in my life where I don't want to waste a lot of time. So I go there very quickly. I set the expectations in the tone of what I'm looking for in a relationship very quickly.
Meaning the second date?
Oh, it could be the first conversation. The first date, why wait for the second date?
Okay.
There are a lot of, we go out on a lot of first dates. Those of us who are single, don't we? We go out on a lot of first dates.
Way too many.
Right. So I'm going to let people know up front that this is, and again, I'm kind and I'm gentle and all of those things, but I'm letting people know up front. You know, I was just seeing a woman who said, we were texting back and forth, and she had been in relationships where the guys didn't communicate. And she said to me, and I loved this, she said, I want to communicate, I just don't know how. And I was very respectful, and I love the fact that she said that, but it didn't make her any better. And then I had to say, you know, do I like her enough to stay engaged and there were other things going on, and I'm not seeing this person any longer. But I think early on, you need to decide what it is you want in a relationship and just put it out there. That's what I've done.
You know, I think the how soon to share that information has a lot to do with how comfortable you are sharing that information. If you're comfortable with what it is that you know that you want and need, it's likely to come across pretty well. And whether it's a first date or a second date or whatever the timing is, if it comes across well, it's communicated. And so it may not come across as being as pushy or assertive or whatever the adjective is. If you're not particularly comfortable communicating that information, it might come across in an awkward way.
To follow up your question, Mark, when it comes to what really make a relationship work. And Antoinette, you know, she follows like Gottman principles, the 7 principles, and it's pretty standard. Like, you know, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you have breakfast, etc. It's kind of like you're becoming like a momentum. And if you follow certain principles that are really common to what really fits you. Of course, you're gonna have to somewhat find what works best for you. You cannot only just read a book and just follow the principle because it might not be what you're looking for. So based on that, what would you suggest for the 7 principles?
Well, I don't really teach my clients the 7 principles because I don't, like you said, I don't want them to focus on those. What I do is help them understand how important it is to develop fondness and admiration with your partner. You really want to get to know who your partner is, not who you expect them to be or want them to be, but who they are and accepting that. And when you do that, then it's a natural closeness that occurs. And you are able to communicate in a way that says that I appreciate you, I value you, and I hear what you're saying, and that person gives the same to you, so it's a reciprocal relationship. And then it develops into something beautiful. You start establishing love maps and creating this shared meaning with one another that lasts.
What would you say about this, Josh, when it comes to, what is an effective communication when it comes to understanding what the other person wants? Do you ask them question, hey, what do you want in this relationship? Or you just pay attention to the sign and then you just adapt to it? Because you cannot make everyone else happy at your expense. You also have to be happy. So what would you be following up on that?
I think all of the above. To know what you want, to know whether or not they want what you want, to understand how those principles come to an intersection. And I think happiness needs to be primary. I work with people who are fighting nonstop. They fight more than they don't fight. And I can't for the life of me figure out why they want to remain in this relationship. And frequently the answer is the kids. We need to stay together for the kids. And what I always say is kids and dogs know. Kids and dogs sense when there are problems. And when there are problems in a relationship, if the kids are aware of it, which I believe they typically are, you're actually doing damage to them. Because we learn how to relate from the people we see related. So if my wife and I have a good relationship and we're showing our kids a functional relationship or what we believe to be a good relationship, then we wind up having kids who know how to have better relationships. If they see us fighting and brawling all the time, they are unlikely to learn how to have a good relationship. So we're doing damage to them. To me, happiness needs to be there, not most of the time, meaning 51% of the time, but 90-something% of the time. That's how I look at it. And if it's not there for me in that way, I'm not going to be happy.
One of the best dating tips that I got after my marriage ended, I happened to be it was at a conference and I was talking to a psychologist who told me not to date. We looked and I was telling Dr. Cohen, her whole practice was made up of professional women whose professional lives, my ex-wife was a physician, and so her professional life was stellar. Her personal life has been a train wreck. And so I was talking to this woman and she's describing these people and I said, you know my ex-wife? And she laughed and she said, no, Bob, I have a whole practice of women made up like your ex-wife. And she said to me, don't date. And I thought, what? What kind of advice is telling me not to date? She said, just hang out. I don't know if you two have ever heard this before. Hanging out was one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten. And what does that mean? It means, listen, everybody looks great over candlelight. If you get a couple drinks in people, they look even better, don't they? Right? But take them to the Target, stop and get gas, go to the mailbox. Do things that you do on a regular basis and watch how they interact with that. Are they impatient? Are they rude? Find out how they treat the server. That's how we find out about people, not in a pretty cocktail dress overlooking a candlelight. We can all do that for an hour or two, can't we? But it's the day-to-day hanging out where people really can't hide who they are. Whatever annoys them is going to rise to the surface. It will. And so I like to hang out with people. Kind of goes back to your comment about sort of getting to it very quickly. I like to talk. I'm not interested in pen pals. I write fairly well, but I've got 6 kids. I'm not interested in texting somebody for a month because I can tell on the first date whether or not there will be a second date. Let's get to that point. That's just my style and my preference, folks. I don't want to waste a lot of time. I don't have it to waste, right?
I'm with you.
And that's where I go, and if I get the resistance, kind of like Antoinette was saying, I'm out. I'm out. It's like that the sharks, I'm out.
Does anyone have like a backup friend? Let's say you go on a date the first time around, and you tell them that after an hour, you call me, or 20 minutes, you tell me that my grandmother died. Or something, just to get out of the date.
Right.
And then they say, oh, you know, and then, but depending on how the day goes, you answer, oh no, it's fine, no problem. Or you say, oh my God, you start crying and acting up. Does anyone have done that before?
It's happened to me.
And has it happened? So here you go.
I've never done it, but I mean, actually, it used to be standard practice back in the 90s, before we had texts and so forth. You know, there was always that 20-minute where I've got to go make a phone call, and then either they came back or they didn't come back. You know.
And now if you don't want to have somebody do that, you can have an app do it for you.
There you go. There's an app for everything, right?
That is scary.
Go ahead,
Hey,
Adam.
Dan, I think you actually have an excellent point. And I want to rephrase your point a little bit. It's the wingman concept where you're playing as a team. You have a buddy that you're looking out for and they're looking out for you. But it only works if you're both looking out for each other. But I think it would be very helpful for all of us to train ourselves on how to help our friends out. Find friends that are good at this and then help them out. I think would be very beneficial in the dating scene in general to have someone who's looking out for you.
Absolutely. It's team player, right?
That also means on the Saturday night when he's calling you 20 minutes into your day, he's sitting at home waiting to call you.
So you're basically destroying
It's
this
gotta
Saturday
be,
night.
well, it's got to be a partnership. The wingman also has to be a partnership.
Yes.
It's got to be an even relationship as well.
Sir, you had a question?
Kids and dogs know, they know what they sense when the relationship is in trouble. So if you're suggesting not to be in a relationship just for the sake of kids, what is your insight on kids who are staying separate from either a mother or a father? How would that impact on them to form their relationships? Would it be healthy or?
That's a great question. Parent alienation is basically what you're talking about, where a kid is not connected with, not interacting with, is in essence steered away from one parent or the other, detrimental to the child. If that's happening, part of what's going on there is, even though you're separated or divorced or somehow disconnected from the person who you were once connected to, you're still very emotionally connected because there's a need or a process by which they are still so angry that they're keeping or directing your child away from you. Not healthy for anyone, but potentially healthier than a constant fighting and disruption in the household. Working toward reconnecting is certainly the goal there. That's an important factor that can come into play for sure.
But by that time, I think most of the emotions drain out. Even if other person says sorry or something.
Sometimes they drain out and sometimes they don't. I had a 16-year-old in my office. He was my patient. Parents were quite wealthy, divorced for, I want to say maybe 10 years already. And they were fighting in my office to the point where I couldn't get them to stop. And that's unusual because I typically have pretty good command of my space in my office. I sent the kid out of the room because I didn't want him to be in the middle of this. I told them to knock it off and they didn't. So I got up and left the room and I went out into the waiting room and sat with the kid and I said, what the hell's going on here? He said, this is every day. This is all the time. He said, they've been divorced for 10 years. Yep. Well, they were not really divorced. They were legally divorced. They were very much emotionally still enmeshed. And that kind of thing happens more frequently than I think people think it happens.
So what you're saying is it's far better option than the kids seeing every day quarreling, the parents quarreling.
In my opinion.
And I would agree with Dr. Cohen. I'm pleasantly surprised that we get quite a few referrals each week for parents who have separated and are looking to learn how to co-parent and communicate with one another better. so that their children can adjust. And so even though our divorce rate is rising and people are living apart, people are still asking for help so that they can do a better job of parenting, and that's a good sign. So it is possible.
Well, it becomes also a big problem when it comes to parenting, like when you're divorcing and then you have kids. Some situation you will have either the mother or the father build the kid against the opposite person. So where you told me a story, Bob, where you had your daughter and you told me that his wife told him that don't come and pick up the kid this weekend because we're busy. And then, but the mother didn't tell her daughter. So the daughter was waiting for Bob to come and pick them up, and he never showed up. So he said, you see what kind of father you have? So that can be very, very difficult, very tough. In a situation like that, so how do you try to tell your kid that, no, I told you, your mom called me, and try to kind of like put the blame on her? Did you try to?
Well, that actually was, no, that was my first wife's parent situation. She came from a divorced family, and they tried to sort of push the real dad out. And so what they would do is, when it was his weekend to pick up the kids, they would call him and say, you can't have the kids this weekend. They would never tell the kids. The kids would sit by the door waiting for daddy. When daddy didn't show up, they would say, the mom remarried, and say, see, your father's no good, I told you. So that was part of the issue, I think, with my ex, that she lived with these issues around abandonment, that my father doesn't want me, not knowing the whole time that it was her mom who was sabotaging the relationship.
Is anyone familiar here with the laws of attraction, the book The Secret from Rhonda Byrne? Has anyone read it? You did out there, okay. Anyone else? It sold over 29 million books, so at least someone here must have read it.
Saw the movie.
Oh, you said the movie, okay. Okay, easier. Good enough, good enough. Well, I mean, they talk about positive thoughts. Positive or, good thoughts becomes good things. So if you go into a relationship, and this is going to be for you, Josh, when it comes to being positive, when it comes to giving positive feedback to your significant other, it's hard when that person is being negative. So how do you counteract? How do you keep on being positive if this person is negative?
I think when you're giving a positive message to somebody else, it's not about, in that instance, it's about the message you're trying to send. You can't control what they're going to receive. They may or may not receive it positively, but if your intentions are true, hopefully they will. That's kind of a flip on some of the stuff I said before, where it's about the receiver receiving the message. But in this instance, relationships happen all the time. They're not a finite instance. And if you're somebody who feels positively about somebody else, let them know on a regular basis. Let them know that that thing they said or that thing that you did made you happy, it made you smile, it made you feel good. You're sharing information about what works for you. That's going to turn around, hopefully, and educate them on how to interact with you. And then down the road, they're going to have a chance to do it again. Similarly, if they're in a negative space for one reason or another, and somebody tells them something positive, maybe that flips their space around. We've all been in situations where we're in a bad mood, we're driving down the road, now somebody cuts us off and we're getting frustrated. Then that song comes on the radio, and all of a sudden we're singing, we're happier, and things are good. It's the same idea. Take a risk to say something positive to the other person on a regular basis and see how it goes.
One of the things I've discovered is a lot of times we have a hard time accepting things that we're not used to. And let me explain to you what I mean. When I got married the second time, I knew that my second wife had very bad relationships with men, and it admitted actually into therapy to hating men. And that was going to be a problem for me because the last I checked, I was a member of that club, but I signed on to do that. I was going to be the guy who was going to shower her with all this love, but you have to remember, she didn't experience a lot of that growing up. So if we give people a double dose of something they're not used to, right? I'm giving you compliments, I'm saying these wonderful things about you, I'm giving you a hug, and they're not used to that, they're probably going to have a hard time with it. And unless you two are acknowledging that, or they're saying, Josh, it feels good when you hug me, but it's a little strange for me too, because I'm not used to that. Can you be patient with me, or can you whatever? Folks, unless you have that dialogue, and they're shutting down, or whatever's going on. You might not even be aware of it. How come when I give her a hug, she pulls away, or he pulls away, or I say this, and I get this response that I'm not expecting, because it's coming from somewhere else. You're pushing a button or a trigger or whatever that, right, in their past that you know nothing about. So sometimes when we do things for people, they don't know where to put it. They really don't know where to put it, how to receive it, how to give it back, how to accept it. That's just a reality that you need to deal with. And let's stop making it so much about us, like, oh, I'm doing this, you know, what am I doing wrong? You may be doing nothing wrong. They're not able to handle it, to accept it, to receive it, to process it.
No, just like a quick rule I mentioned here is that, does anyone, and this is for the men here, do you all know the best 2 words to use to end every conflict with a woman?
You're right.
Yes, dear. Basically, after that, what can she counteract with? Nothing, right? So that is the best way. And of course, some
I
of
gotta
us will try to
dispute-
point.
I gotta dispute that. My wife was a quick learner. And
Oh,
she
she
knew,
was, okay.
she
So what was
picked
her-
up on that, and every time I said yes, dear, she said, don't you yes, dear me.
Okay, so you have to come back to another
And that
comeback.
could come across as condescending
Yes.
all the time.
It needs to
That's
be
what you always
genuine
say.
and authentic.
Oh no, you have to be genuine. Of course, yes, dear, yes, whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to, we talked a little bit about technology that was came from you, Steve. When it comes to using text and using Snapchat and all the other technology medium that we have out there, Facebook, people do not talk anymore. Now, can you express yourself efficiently using text?
No.
There's no tone coming out of it. And 99.9% of the time, people will misperceive or misconstrue the text as being insulting.
Well, I think.
Or depending on how it's being written, of course.
And
So
it goes
the writer
beyond
is-
that. I mean, it goes beyond, first of all, I mean, you know, the statistics on communication are that, and I'm going to rough it, but it's 70% is body language, 20% is tone and nonverbal, and 10% is the words. When you got text, you're taking 90% of the communication out of the equation. So right away. Number 2, people don't even read the texts. You know, they'll ask you 5 questions, you give them 5 answers, they read the first line, they don't read the rest of it, and you wonder later, or the reverse. You know, you ask 5 questions, they half answer the first one. How is that a communication?
Well, then, at the same
I mean,
time-
communication also starts with com, which means together. So there's no coming together there.
Well, also, at the same time, is that if, let's say, you send a text to someone that you just met, and that person doesn't answer immediately, aren't we like all the society of like instant gratification that we need? So we stick with the phone and say, how come she didn't answer? How come he didn't answer? And you spend the whole day, and then at the end of the day, when they do answer, you kind of like blow them off. Say, oh.
Well, that goes back to what I said. So you have to, so if you expect a response in 24 hours, that's fair. That's what you expect. You have an obligation to communicate that to the person that you're chatting with, okay? And they can either accept that because that's what Steve needs or not. And then you have to live with that or find some space in the middle. But I agree with you. So we send them off and the other person thinks, and I've done that with people and they say, I don't always have my phone with me. Well, that's fine. Communicate that with me. So if you send me a text, I'll get to it when I get to it. I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you, Steve. It's just that I don't always have my phone with me. But if you're hyper about the response and expect it immediately, you're going to be upset. You need to communicate what the expectations are around your method of communication.
And there's also like different attachment style. I mean, you know, some people are very needy, some others are not. Antoinette, what would you say, or how do attachment styles impact relationships?
How they impact relationships is that we tend to attract the same person over and over. And I think that's what Bob was mentioning about his marriages. But we need to understand what our attachment style is and what our partner's attachment style is. So the 3 different ones are anxious, avoidant, and secure. Okay, so secure is an easy yes, right? That means they're comfortable loving another person or expressing that, they're warm, and they're able to connect. Whereas an anxious person is constantly in their head, worrying about things, whether or not their partner is capable or able to love them. In some sort of way. Oftentimes not even in a way that they think they want to be loved because they haven't expressed it. Whereas an avoidant person has some trouble with attaching to someone because they don't want to lose their independence or autonomy in the relationship. So they tend to take a step back. So if you pair an anxious and avoidant person together, what's going to happen? Someone's pulling away and someone's over attaching. okay? But they're not having a communication about what it is that they need from one another. I like Bob's example about trying to hug and love on a person who's not used to it, okay? So that person may be slightly avoidant and pull away from it. Whereas that anxious person is saying that I'm showing you all the love and affection that you need, why don't you want it? But never asking that avoidant type of personality of what is it that you need? What would make you feel safe? What makes you feel loved? We're never having these type of conversations. We're just abiding by the golden rule, treating people the way we want to be treated. It doesn't work so well in relationships.
You know, that makes me think of the 5 love languages, where one of the primary premises of the book is that you need to know how the other person experiences and receives positive interaction, love. How do they feel loved and cared for? And if you can communicate in their language, not your language, you're going to have more likelihood of successful communication. And so if somebody, for example, likes acts of service, so that makes them feel, if somebody feels taken care of in that way, and you cut the lawn, and they say, why do you think that says that you're caring for me? I asked you to put gas in my car. Okay, that's a different language. And so figuring out how they're going to respond and providing that is going to be more successful. Now you have to become comfortable interacting with their type of receipt of information. And if you can be, and you speak their language and they can speak your language, you're going to wind up in a pretty good space.
Folks, so much of what we do, and I talk about it in my book, and I found out that Gandhi said it a bunch of years after I put it in my book, I was happy to see that, is so much of what we do, we live in fear. We live in fear of rejection, we live in fear of embarrassment, we live in fear of confrontation, we live in fear of failure. And that fear motivates our behavior. If I ask you what you want, Steve, what's going to happen? You're either going to give me what I want, you're going to reject me, you're going to deny me, you're going to say I can't do that, and then what do we do with that? Think about that. Think about the last time or the next time you need something. You need it from your boss or your spouse or your kids. We're putting ourselves at risk, folks, every time we ask for something. We may not like the answer. So much of what we do is paralyzing behavior because so much of it is based in fear. We need to get over that fear. You need to be comfortable with yourself. It goes back to what I said in my opening remarks. And I practice what I preach. You need to communicate with yourself. What do I want? How do I feel? And it's okay. Nobody else has to like what you want and the way you feel. It doesn't matter. You have to be comfortable with you. If you can't be comfortable with you, the rest of the world's not going to be. Okay? You have to own your stuff, and that's really what it comes down to. Let that fear go of what other people think and say and do. Let that go.
One thing that motivated me to find more about who I was, before I even attacked anything else, So right now, I've gotten to the point where I'm really kind of comfortable with me, and I'm really not afraid. That first date, second date is where I let them know the things that I'm looking for, And if they're not, I think I try to use non-evaluative criticism. Whatever you do, it ain't wrong for you, just
Absolutely.
not right for me.
Correct.
So I already know what I'm looking for. So I guess I'm kind of choosy. So I might go some periods of time not being in a relationship, only because I don't want to get frivolous in the people I choose. And not only that, I'm a dived-in hard type guy too. So so if I'm going, I'm going. So I don't want to waste my time or their time. I would say I got time to spare, but no time to waste.
What is love? When you were telling me about this last time.
You would ask me what you call it right?
Well, we're talking about love and hate, so.
So it's romantic love, affectionate love, and consummate love. Romantic love is that early phase of infatuation and sexuality. Raw animal attraction, like you can't get enough of that person. But that phase shortly, right? Like, would you say it lasts maybe 18 months?
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
I'd like to think it lasts longer than that.
Yeah, I think it does. does if you get the other two parts right.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely does. But what happens is we get caught up in that first stage of love. We want to keep that and don't work on building the other parts of love, the friendship and the admiration and then the commitment. Okay, so we need all three, and that's why Dr. Cohen is saying he hopes that it lasts, because yes, we want to keep that part, but you got to add the other two parts too.
And that's what the New York Times, article covers that to a degree.
And so when you had mentioned the article and Bob sharing his experiences, it's basically just saying that as adults, we recreate those early childhood relationships. Good, bad, or indifferent, we recreate them. And it's not until we fully understand who we are and what we really want as adults that makes us feel good that we change that.
Now, most of us, when we go to work every single day, 8 hours, so during the week you put in 40 hours. So you're more at work than you are with your significant other. So when you're having issues at work, with your boss, with your coworkers, do you feel that you need to bring the problem back at home? Dr. Josh, what do you feel about that, about bringing and sharing your discontent with your coworkers and bringing it at home and bringing the issue at home?
I think you spend that much time at work and you consider this other person your significant other. If you're not coming home and talking about work and talking about your day, they're missing out on a big part of your life. And so how can you really have a connection and a complete relationship when some huge percentage of your world is not being shared? So to me, understanding what to share, how much to share, for guys who say, I want to leave work at work, I don't want to bring that stuff home, I think that's a bad idea. Bring some of it home, share some of it so the person is connected.
I'm not in any type of relationship. I'm just dating right now. So, but thinking back to the two post-divorce relationships, which were kind of ended up being these quasi to me, I thought we were in a relationship, and then when it kind of fizzled out, I was like, well, I guess it wasn't really actually as serious to the other person as I thought it was. So that's why, I'm asking the question, am I waiting too long to have that conversation? It seems like to me I am. And from what I've heard from the panel so far today, it's about having that continuous and upfront communication. But the thing is, I don't initially I don't even know if I want to be with this person.
Well, that's really the answer right there, and I think as Dr. Cohen said, unless you know what it is what you want, and what I'm hearing, maybe I'd be curious what the two of you think, you sound a little confused as to what you want. And until
I'm not confused about what I want. It's
okay.
just, I'm feeling out the person, I feel it's important to feel out a person for
Right.
a while to get to know
Well, but
them.
I'm saying, you thought you were in a relationship with these other people, but they didn't think that, right?
Or that it wasn't, yeah.
It wasn't as serious maybe as you thought it was. Right, so then there's a gap in the communication right there. And maybe you'll walk out of here this afternoon realizing that it's okay, not only okay, it's desirable for you to express what you're looking for. Listen, if it's just about sex, that's okay from my perspective as long as both parties agree.
Yeah, I guess I think it's also the disconnect between how men and women are, and then also with how I am, because one, I'm perfectly fine, hanging out with, because I'm in my mind, I'm well, we're getting to know one another. We're not necessarily dating until we have that conversation. But by the time I'm ready to have that conversation, it's I think I set the precedent that it's just casual.
So perhaps start off by having a conversation.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a waiting game.
Right.
We can start up front saying, I have no idea what it is that I want from you in particular. I might know what I want from my partner, but whether or not you're it, I don't know. I'm taking the time to figure that out, but it's an ongoing conversation. It happens over time. You don't just wake up one day and say, aha, it's him, and tell him, and then he's like, no, you're not it. We don't want to do that. We want to continue to have a conversation.
Otherwise, you're sending mixed messages. So if you're not having that communication, I'm going along and it's our fourth or fifth date, I'm thinking we've got a connection here, and the whole time you're at a different wavelength, right? So I think it's, yeah, you're sending, yeah, have that conversation sooner.
Well, actually, the good thing about this show or this event being like a pilot is because all the specific topic about communication, about dating, about different other aspects of relationship is going to be definitely covered with other shows that we're going to have. Today was, like I said, we just wanted to give a tidbit of every little part of how this series of seminar is going to be in the near future. So obviously, what we wanted to do today is to be able to have a live audience, to be able to give themselves like at least some kind of feeling of how they took this seminar, they learned something from it. Because as I said, the three experts here, they have enough knowledge to be able to fulfill your minds for the next 10 years. So that's the one good thing, is that I made sure to select them in a very, very specific way, knowing what was the level of specialty, to make sure to bring you the best of the best. So it is the conclusion of the seminar. So I'm going to first thank everyone for coming over today. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask us. I would like to thank Bob, which was actually, like I said, it was just a pure coincidence. Because a very good friend of mine, she's an author, and I was supposed to have a show yesterday. I did have a show thanks to her and forwarding me Bob to say, you know what, Dan, I know someone in Baltimore, and he's an expert in communication. You should interview him on TV. And he came yesterday, and he came today again to be able to share his knowledge with all of you. So a big round of applause for Bob. I'd like to thank Joshua Cohen, which is a very good friend of mine. He works out every morning at 5:30 a.m. at the gym, and I see him every morning at the gym. So I knew when I saw him, and we had a face-to-face a couple months ago, and I said, you know what, you'll be the best for this seminar. And I knew, he's like the most gentle person, most knowledgeable person I know. So a big round of applause for Josh. And finally, Antoinette, and I came across her through a meetup group. And I'm sure that a lot of you know Meetup. And I sent her a message based on her profile that was presented on the Meetup. And I said, you know what, she would be the best of the best to be a contributing part of this seminar. So big round of applause for her.